Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of True Crime and Chill. I am your host, Gabby, and joining me today is Haley. How are you doing today?
Hi, doing pretty good. Got to see my parents. Did a little early Father's Day for my dad since I'm on call next weekend. I was supposed to be on call this Sunday, but my boss's birthday is next weekend, so we switched.
Okay, good. I'm sure your dad appreciated that. Did you get him any sort of gift?
Yeah, so thankfully both my parents have an Amazon wish list. It makes it really easy to buy them gifts, and they come fast. So he's recently got into a lot of art stuff, so I got him this artsy type sketching book.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm really excited because for Father's Day next weekend, or when this episode comes out, it'll probably be upcoming Sunday. I'm planning on seeing my dad for like the first time since Christmas because, with the whole quarantine and then all the other crazy stuff going on, I couldn't make the plan to go see my dad back home. So I'm really pumped, and I'm glad I made the time to see him on Father's Day of all days, and he's super pumped. And I got him this really cool gift that I think he's just going to be so happy about.
That's really exciting. Yeah, we're going to see my in-laws on actual Father's Day. So, we just try to split the holidays and try to figure out what days we can go to which house, since they kind of live like 2-3 hours apart.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that you do that. And I kind of do that as well with my in-laws. Most of them live in Tennessee, so kind of a drive.
Yeah.
His mom and stepdad and his brother, sister. Pretty much his whole immediate family lives in Tennessee, which is like an 8 to 10 hour drive.
Yeah, it's far, and sometimes you can't afford those flights, so you just got to visit when you can.
Yeah, and fingers crossed, we're planning on going to Tennessee during the 4th of July, so very happy about that.
Fingers crossed, nothing changes that.
Yeah. So in the last episode, we talked about some serial killers, and we're going to continue on with our little serial killer mini series. But we're going to do something interesting with today. We're going to talk about serial killers with states or locations in their names. And we're going to talk about how one of these serial killers may have been involved in the Nicole Brown Simpson murder. Maybe. And maybe Ted Bundy did something nice for a change. You be the judge. But it's interesting that we found some serial killers where other subjects are briefly mentioned. I thought that was pretty interesting.
I know, bring in some of our old episodes.
Yeah. Everything just comes full circle.
Exactly.
But before we begin, I have a Trivial Pursuit question for you, Haley, and for our listeners. My fiance and I were playing Trivial Pursuit over the weekend, and we came across this one question. It was kind of fitting to true crime, so maybe you might know the answer to this.
Maybe. I'm horrible at trivia games, but I will give it a try.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Which deathly pungent flower said to smell like rotting flesh blooms once every 7 to 10 years?
Oh my goodness. I do not know this, but I would never want to smell that flower because I have smelled dead flesh, I've been on crime scenes where the person's been down for 3 weeks, but honestly, I have zero idea. My mom is so good at trivia. Like, she answers a Jeopardy question before he's done reading it. So she might know this one. I'm going to try to ask her before she listens to this. But I have zero idea.
Zero idea?
Yeah.
All right. The answer is the corpse flower.
Well, that makes sense. God, I could have just guessed it and maybe got it right. Who knew it would be so
So it could be possible instead of dead bodies, they could just have a corpse flower planted in their backyard or something. I doubt it, but.
I doubt it, but that would be really weird to plant in your yard. I'm pretty sure nobody likes the smell of like dead things. So, well, I don't know, serial killers might, but
yeah,
they keep them in their crawl space. Who knows?
All right. So that was a little fun trivia question for everybody. And if you got it right, good for you. If not, that was a tough question. I didn't know. I said the death flower.
Yeah.
But I had no clue.
I never heard of that, so that's interesting. I don't know why there's a flower that smells like dead things. That's really weird.
Mother Nature is full of
little surprises.
Little surprises. Yes. All right. So let's start with our first killer. We wanted to talk about him on our unsolved serial killers in our previous episode, but as of 2 years ago, he has been captured, so he is no longer unsolved. So we're going to start off with the Golden State Killer, also known as Joseph James DeAngelo. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of background information up on the killer, which was kind of odd, but there is a ton of information about his crimes and how his crimes could have been linked to his capture. So, the Golden State Killer is a serial killer, serial rapist, and burglar who committed at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries in California from 1974 to 1986. So if he was captured in 2018, that's over, 40 years?
Yeah.
About 44 years where he was left undetected. That's insane.
That is insane. It's a long time.
So he is believed to be responsible for at least 3 crime sprees throughout California, each of which spawned a different nickname in the press before it became evident that these were committed by the same person. These names included the East Area Rapist from the Sacramento area, Original Night Stalker, and the Visalia Ransacker. He is suspected to have begun as the Visalia Ransacker. Over 20 months, from April of 1974 to December of 1975, the ransacker is believed to have been responsible for 1 murder and about 120 burglaries. Most of these activities included breaking into houses, vandalizing the owner's possessions, scattering women's underwear, stealing coins and low value or personal items while ignoring banknotes and other valuable items in plain sight. The first recorded ransacking was on March 19th, 1974, when $50 of coins was stolen from a piggy bank. How is he
stealing a piggy bank? Did he pour it out? Did they know exactly how many coins were in their piggy bank? Did they count? That's weird.
Did he have a sack or something that he was carrying with him?
Did he take the whole piggy bank? I'm confused. I don't know. But I wonder if that one murder with the ransacker is because he got caught by the homeowner in this, or if it was just because he wanted to murder someone. Because I know sometimes that burglaries or robberies turn deadly because they get caught, or somebody tries to stop them, and then it ends in that person dying. So it's interesting that there was only 1 murder during all of those burglaries. I know they call them ransacking, which is just another word for burglary.
Well, the first murder was on September 11th, 1975. A man believed to be the ransacker broke into the home of Claude Snelling. Snelling was awoken around 2 a.m. by a noise in his home. Upon leaving his bedroom, Snelling shouted and ran through the open back door and confronted the intruder in his carport, attempting to kidnap his daughter.
Oh, gosh.
Snelling was then shot twice, where he staggered back into the house and later died. On December 12, 1975, the suspect attempted to burglarize a home where he would frequent. When Detective William McGowan attempted to detain the man, the suspect shrieked, removed his mask, and feigned surrender after McGowan fired a warning shot. However, after jumping the fence, he pulled out a revolver and fired near McGowan's face and shattered his flashlight. The shooter was able to escape.
Wow.
Yeah. So now maybe he moved from the Visalia area after this incident with the detective, because the detective probably had a good profile on him.
Right. Saw his face, at least.
Mm-hmm. Because now the Golden State Killer was also known as the East Area Rapist. And after leaving Visalia, the Golden State Killer was believed to have moved to the Sacramento area, progressing from burglary to rape in mid-1976. His initial mode of operating was to stalk middle-class neighborhoods at night in search of women who were alone in one-story homes, usually near a school, creek, trail, or other open space that would provide a quick escape. Police, yeah, it's very interesting. I thought the same thing when I was reading about
smart. Them. Something that my mom and I were just talking about today actually was that, as a younger woman, we're kind of taught certain things to watch our surroundings and maybe not take the same way home from work every time, so that if somebody's kind of watching you, they won't know exactly your route that you go home. So it's interesting. Right. Like, I wonder how often he would watch people to figure out if they fit these specific things that he wanted. It's creepy.
So police believed he conducted extensive reconnaissance in a target home. Yeah. Such as looking into windows and prowling yards before planning an attack. Sometimes he entered the homes of future victims to unlock windows, unload guns, and plant ligatures for later use. Also, he frequently phoned future victims, sometimes for months in advance, to learn their daily routines.
That's so scary to think about as a woman,
Yeah. I'm curious as to how those phone calls went.
Yeah. I don't know. That's crazy. Just the fact that he was going in and unlocking windows beforehand, or, unloading guns, or, leaving things around, and these people didn't even know that somebody had been in their home. That just gives you the chills, Somebody could be in here without you knowing.
Yeah, and it's just, I'm trying to picture the phone call in my head. I mean, I understand the 70s were a different time than today, but you have to imagine if you're getting a phone call, and I'm sure he's asking some pretty personal questions, because he'd have to know these things in order to plan his attacks out perfectly. I would be, at least in my opinion, I would be a little suspicious if I got a phone call and someone's asking about what I do in a day, or how I get home. And
right. I don't know if maybe it was a different time, and maybe because the things we see in the media now, or, the type of jobs we have, and the stuff we studied in college, we kind of know those are scams when people start wanting certain information, or they want you to pay for something for you to receive it, you get pay this much money and I'll send you this much money, which makes no sense. So, in my job now, when I was, or I should say previously, when I was a dispatcher, a lot of the scams were elderly people, because that generation wasn't, I guess, maybe as cautious about people calling and just asking them information. So they would call and do things like, your grandson's in prison and I need you to pay this much money to get him out. And, they're not really going to ask a whole lot of questions. They just want to help their family. So maybe it was just the time period.
Yeah, I have heard that elderly people, as well as younger teenagers, are most targeted when it comes to scams.
Yeah, and it's to get their social security numbers and stuff like that. It's always the IRS is saying you have a warrant out for your arrest. Look, the IRS is never gonna just call you. Okay.
Yeah.
Put that out there. It's a scam if they say they're IRS.
And also, like, the Nigerian prince who's like, I want to
yes.
send you, like, $5 million in an email.
Yes. Scam. It was all a scam. Do not click on it. Do not accept. Delete the voicemails, please. Oh gosh, there's so many nowadays. But yeah, I feel bad that it's like the elderly that's kind of picked on.
Mhm. All right, moving on. Although he originally targeted women alone in their homes or with their children, the offender eventually preferred attacking couples. He would break in through a window or sliding glass door and awaken the couples with a flashlight and threaten them with a handgun. Then victims were bound with shoelaces where he found or brought them with, blindfolded and gagged them with towels which he had ripped up into strips. The female victim was usually forced to tie up her male companion before she was bound. The bindings were so tight that the victim's hands were numb for hours after being untied. He often separated the couples and stacked dishes on the male's back and threatened to kill everyone if he heard them rattle. He moved the woman to the living room and would rape her repeatedly, sometimes for several hours.
It's crazy to me that he specifically picked couples, but then wasn't like having, I know this is kind of creepy to say, but wasn't having the men watch, because it's like, why are you attacking couples, which makes it harder on you if you're just going to separate them anyway. So it's, I don't know, that's really interesting. And he just seems like somebody who was very well like planned out. He didn't go in and make a whole lot of mistakes. Obviously, you got away for so long.
Maybe it's a mental thing. Like, if your companion is in a different room, especially if you've been threatened. Yeah, you can hear it, and you've been threatened with these dishes on your back. And if you move and cause any noise, you can cause both people to get murdered. Maybe it's just a mental thing.
It sounds like a mind game.
Yeah, that's what I think.
That makes sense, yeah. Because if why else would you attack couples instead of making it kind of, as horrible as it sounds, easier by just being somebody home alone? And obviously he was escalating. You know, he started with just somebody home alone, and then all of a sudden now it's two people at home, a couple.
Maybe it was a challenge for him.
He's trying to make it harder.
Yeah, because he knows that he could have gotten away with murdering or ransacking homes with just a single person in the house, but maybe that was just too easy for him, so he wanted to like step it up and see what else he could get away with and try to attack couples in their home.
That does sound pretty like it could be true. Something that could motivate him.
The offender spent hours in the home ransacking closets and drawers, eating food in the kitchen, drinking beer, raping the female again, or making additional threats. Then the offender often crept away, leaving victims uncertain if he had left. So just imagine all this terrible stuff has happened to you. Your home is being ransacked. You've been given death threats. And you know if you move or you make any noise, you could get murdered. You and your partner could get murdered. I don't know what I would do.
No, I feel like they probably laid there for hours before they made sure he was gone. And it's crazy because I know we'll kind of get into it here in a little bit, but just how DNA evidence was so different back then to now, because those beer bottles that he drank from, those would be great to get DNA off of. So like in my mind, I'm thinking, man, there was a lot of evidence left behind if he's touching all these food bags and he's drinking out of these beer bottles. Like, here's all this evidence. But back then it was so different that they couldn't do that. They couldn't take it and get things off of it. Which sucks.
Now, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but do you think that a serial offender like the Golden State Killer would do these things on purpose because he knows it was easier to get away with leaving DNA behind?
Maybe, because it just seems weird that he would commit the crimes and then he's just going to stand by and like eat and drink. Like, you think you commit the act, you commit the crime, you want to get away as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the burglaries that I've had to work, it's just like a smash and grab, smash
Right.
get into it, grab what you can and get out. So it seemed like he was just kind of taking his time. Like he was enjoying tormenting them mentally by just walking around eating all their food and stuff. It's just, yeah, I don't know. That seems like it was a huge mind game to him.
Yeah, that's what I think. But you could be right. This whole case is just bizarre from top to bottom.
Bizarre, especially because he got away with it for so long. And I feel like you're right. Like, because he was getting away with it, he was like, well, how do I like up the ante? How do I make this harder on myself without still getting caught?
Mm-hmm. All right. So the offender operated in Sacramento County from the first attacks in June of 1976 until May of 1977. After a 3-month gap, he struck in nearby San Joaquin County in September before returning to Sacramento. The offender attacked 5 times during the summer of 1978 before disappearing again for 3 months. Attacks lasted until July of 1979. So now moving on to the original Night Stalker, who was also tied to being the Golden State Killer. Shortly after the rape committed in July of 1979, the East Area Rapist moved to Southern California and first struck in Santa Barbara County in October. The attacks lasted until 1981, with a lone attack in 1986. Only one couple survived, but other victims were murdered by gunshot or bludgeoning. Since the East Area Rapist was not linked to these crimes for decades, he was known as the Night Stalker in the area before being renamed the original Night Stalker after serial killer Richard Ramirez received the former nickname. That's a nice little fun fact for people who didn't know.
Yeah. There's another Night Stalker. That's the one that I knew. I didn't even know the Golden State Killer was called Night Stalker. When I hear that, I think of the other guy.
I didn't either. All right. So let's move on to some profile information about what they knew the Golden State Killer to be, well, before they knew who he actually was. So victims described the perpetrator to be about 18 to 25 years old, had blonde or brown hair, blue eyes, and they said he had an exceptionally small penis.
I love that that was like, no, I'm going to describe him, and I'm for sure going to tell them how big his penis was. Like,
drag him.
I mean, they went through horrible things. They might as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
Expose him. All right. After criminologists matched serological evidence found at the Southern California murder scenes, a speculative psychological profile of the Golden State Killer was compiled based on probabilistic analysis. The Golden State Killer probably had the following characteristics. He engaged in paraphilic behavior and brutal sex in his personal life, had some knowledge of police investigative methods and evidence gathering techniques. And this makes more sense once I provide some details of who the Golden State Killer is.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but it makes sense with what his background was. He also dressed well and would not stand out in upper class neighborhoods. Skilled, experienced cat burglar. That's a weird fact.
Yeah.
Would have been described by those who knew him as arrogant, domineering, manipulative, and a chronic liar. And there were a lot more, but for the sake of time, I narrowed it down to a few. So, on April 24th, 2018, former police officer Joseph James D'Angelo was arrested and charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. On May 10th, 2018, he was charged with 4 additional counts of first-degree murder. FBI detectives uploaded the killer's DNA profile from a Ventura County rape kit to the personal I don't even remember how to pronounce this word, but the genome website GEDmatch. The website identified 10 to 20 distant relatives of the Golden State Killer, on April 18th, a DNA sample was surreptitiously collected from the door handle of DeAngelo's car, and later another sample was collected from a tissue found in DeAngelo's curbside garbage can. Both were matched to samples associated with Golden State Killer's crime. So they had compiled all of these distant relatives and created a large family tree to try to match genetics from this like 23andMe, Ancestry.com type website. And this is how they were able to
it worked.
Him.
Yeah. So crazy to me.
That is crazy. And I think it's pretty nuts that they went into such depth. And then they were able to link him from this family tree and then using 2 samples from his car and a tissue.
Yeah, I know when they have cases that they can't solve, they like don't stop thinking about it. Like it is everything to them to solve those cases. So I feel like these 3 areas probably were just so happy to be able to match it back to this guy that they were willing to do as much work as needed to do that and catch him. But it's crazy. I mean, these 23andMe, Ancestry.com, all that stuff now, this isn't the only like killer. I wouldn't say serial killer, but this is the only person that's been caught based on like DNA from these things. So it's kind of cool that it came out for different reasons, but it also helps solve crimes.
Mm-hmm. And an odd thing was, at the time, he was living with a daughter and a granddaughter at the time of his arrest. That's really unsettling.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of serial killers that I researched in school had families, but you just don't know. Like, obviously, he was raping women, and he tried to kidnap a little girl in the first area he lived in. So it's like, were his poor daughter and granddaughter subjected to any of that behavior?
I certainly hope not.
I hope not too. Like maybe it was because they were family you didn't, but it's crazy that they can kind of live these double lives.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember in past episodes, some of these serial killers don't spare their family members.
That's true. They yell at their dead mom for hours.
Yes. So I certainly hope that DeAngelo spares his family, considering he had a granddaughter and oh God.
I feel like after he was arrested in jail, they would speak up if something had happened, because there's no threat of him coming back and hurting them again. Or maybe they were just like, oh, he's gone, I don't need to speak up. I don't know. It could be either.
Yeah. So more recently, on March 4th, 2020, Joseph James DeAngelo was offered to plead guilty if the death penalty was taken off the table. However, the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office countered, saying that they will continue to seek the death penalty. So he hasn't been sentenced or anything, which was news to me. I know,
2 years. Like, that's a long time to not sentence somebody that you have like evidence, like DNA evidence. That's crazy. But they're like gung ho on the death penalty for him, so that's probably why.
So I mean, I remember seeing on the news when they captured him. I didn't have a ton of information on the Golden State Killer in 2018. I vaguely knew who he was, but not the depth that I know right now. And when I saw in the news that it was this like super old guy, I'm like, they're going to try to give this man the death penalty. He looks like he's going to die in a couple years anyways.
Yeah, and like we said before, it's more expensive. So, I mean, just put him in jail for life. It's not going to cost the state as much money, and he's going to die in prison anyway. So, I don't know.
He may not even make it to his execution date.
Right.
Because if you look at his mugshot, he does not look like he's in good shape at all.
No, I mean, health-wise, he might not be, but I don't know. It just seems like they're trying to give him the death penalty because, he did all these horrible things. Let's give him the death penalty. Right. He deserves the death penalty. And it's like, life in prison is still, you still lose your life. You're just still alive in prison, but you don't have a life anymore. That is your life. So I think people are just stuck on the idea that he deserves it, so he should get it. But in reality, it'd be cheaper just to throw him in a prison cell for the rest of his life.
Yeah. So a little background information from what we do know. I don't know really anything about his childhood. I tried to research it upon different websites, and I really didn't find anything, not like what I've described other serial killers and other murderers. The most I know, which I found interesting, considering we just mentioned this, he earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Sacramento State University. So with him being a police officer, having a background in criminal justice, he knows the law very well.
Which, I mean, it had to have been like him knowing, okay, I'll drink from this beer bottle because we don't have the ability to test that as evidence. Like, that makes more sense now because he has that knowledge, so he would know that they didn't have those capabilities. But, I mean, technology is constantly growing. You have to know that eventually they're going to be able to test things that we've never been able to test before. So it still seems like a very risky maneuver that I think more to what you were saying, where he's just trying to figure out what he could get away with.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, this was a very bizarre case, and thank God they caught him.
Yeah, I'm glad. Even though it took a really long time, still caught him. The DNA evidence is very nice that we can test that nowadays, especially going back to these older and cold cases and testing that evidence, not just new cases, has been very helpful for getting justice for people.
All right, so moving on to another serial killer. This man is very well known, notorious, because he has done a lot of terrible things. We're going to talk about Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer. And Haley, you said you have a lot of background knowledge on this particular killer, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems weird to say your favorite serial killer, but going through school, there was just so much information on him. It was easy to like study and write papers on. And I did a study abroad type program, but in DC. So I didn't leave the country because it was cheaper. And I got to tour buildings like the Secret Service buildings, the FBI and stuff like that. So it was just really cool experience. And we had to write a 40-page paper. Not fun. And we had to do 3 interviews for this paper. And one of my interviews was the detective, David Reichart, who captured the Green River Killer after this. I think it was 20-year investigation. And he was, at the time, a congressman for Washington State. So Congress wasn't in session, which was sad. They were in DC when I was there, so I had to do a phone interview with him. But it was just still really cool. I wrote his book that David Reichart wrote on it. And so I got to talk to him a little bit about that and then learn from his point of view. My paper was on the media and how the media influences serial killers, and just kind of get his point of view on that, and then his point of view on what motivated the Green River Killer. So it's pretty much a highlight of my college career.
Okay. All right, so let's start from the beginning. On February 18th, 1949, Gary Ridgway was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. His home was somewhat troubled. Relatives have described his mother as being domineering and witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. His father was a bus driver who would often complain about the presence of sex workers. So this next fact I thought was kind of odd, considering we've had a lot of serial killers with mommy issues.
Yeah. Quite a few.
He's definitely one of them after this little fact. Gary Ridgway had a bedwetting problem until he was 13. And his mother would wash his genitals after every episode. So I don't know how many times a night or a week he would do this, but just imagining like being 13 years old, you're going through
Yeah.
puberty, and your mom has to wash you like that. It has to be incredibly embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, that's just weird. I don't know. I feel like, especially at 13 years old, he could wash himself. So, where is the
Right.
need for her to do that? I mean, even, 8, 9, 10, like for years, he could have been washing himself. So, it's just really weird that she would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So, Ridgway told a defense psychologist that as an adolescent, he had conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction toward his mother and fantasized about killing her.
Yeah. So, in my interview with Congressman Reichart, he said that a very unusual relationship with his mother caused him to basically lose respect for women. And because of his dad speaking about prostitutes and stuff like that, he basically viewed all women as prostitutes from this relationship with his mom. Yeah, so he basically had zero respect for women because of his mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
So Gary Ridgway is dyslexic and was held back a year in high school. When he was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. So it sounds like he was starting his crimes as young as 16 that I know of. I don't know if you know anything prior to being 16, if he was committing any other crimes.
Yeah, I don't remember ever hearing of anything like before that one. So, I mean, he might have been fantasizing or like practicing and people just didn't know about it, like animals or something.
Gary Ridgway's IQ was recorded as being in the low 80s. So if you remember from our prior episode with Ed Kemper, his IQ was about 137 to 147. So significantly higher. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just think Gary Ridgway got away for such a long time, and we'll get into a little bit later, I'm sure, all the details, but for him to have such like a lower IQ and still be able to evade the police that long, I don't know. It's weird. Some type of intelligence he had, it just wasn't recorded in like an IQ version, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I was very shocked by that. You would associate serial killers, especially those who are so particular and meticulous with planning their attacks out, they'd be a lot smarter. So when I saw that he had an IQ in like the 80s, I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, that is pretty surprising. I don't remember if I ever read that about him, so it's new to me.
I learn something new every day.
Exactly, especially on these.
So after high school, Gary Ridgway married his 19-year-old high school girlfriend. 19 years old in high school. Is she like a super senior?
Apparently. I mean, didn't he get held back too? So
yeah.
He just found somebody else who had been held back.
Yeah. So after he married his girlfriend, he joined the U.S. Navy and was sent to Vietnam. While in Vietnam, he saw combat. During his time in the military, Gary frequently had sex with sex workers and contracted gonorrhea. Although he was angered by this, he continued this activity without protection.
There's that low IQ coming in.
So I know military combat can definitely cause some psychological issues.
Yeah, for sure. I think, also in that interview, the detective, he said that nobody really knows why he started killing. When you asked him, his response was, because I could. And he had this was crazy to me. He said absolutely zero remorse or guilt for any of it still. Like, past when he was arrested and put in prison and all that, never had remorse or guilt for any of it.
Wow.
So nobody really knows like the full motivation for it, which is crazy. They just kind of draw from, his childhood and stuff like that, and maybe some PTSD too.
Mm-hmm. That is chilling, honestly.
Isn't it? like, I mean, just the type of like sociopath that he really was to really just not care that he took so many lives.
Oh my God.
That's scary.
Complete lack of empathy.
Yeah.
Wow. So, another interesting fact, friends and family described him as being friendly but strange. And that struck me a little odd now, especially now that you revealed that little fact where he had complete lack of empathy towards any of the crimes that he did, but people thought he was friendly.
Yeah, I think when I remember researching him, he had his family, he was like a deacon in his church, he had a job, like he was able to be 100% different person with these people and then turned around and like murdered all these women. So it's, I don't know, it's just like you said, chilling or creepy that somebody can be so different or so fake and you believe he's like a friendly guy. And then you're like, oh, just kidding. He kills people.
Yeah, so you got a little ahead of me, but that's
sorry.
Totally fine. No, that's totally fine. He became religious during his second marriage, and he would go door to door, reading the Bible, selling the Bible. He would read the Bible aloud at work and at home. He would frequently cry after sermons or reading the Bible. And all very strange with someone who claims that he is very religious, and yet he would do something so horrifying.
Yeah, like so against it, like such the cardinal sin, as they say, and then also have no remorse. Like, how can you even call yourself religious?
Yeah, maybe it's a facade that he wanted to try to blind people.
Yeah, like try to help him get away with it.
No, it could never be him. He's too religious. I mean, he reads the Bible every day. Yeah, he's too friendly. He reads the Bible. He goes to church. He cries after church. It could never be him.
Yeah, you kind of have like that charismatic that we've seen in, Bundy and other serial killers where they're able to basically make people believe what they want them to believe. And it seems like that's what he was playing off of.
Yeah, very manipulative. According to women in his life, Ridgway had an insatiable sexual appetite. He wanted his wife to participate in sex in public and inappropriate places, sometimes even in areas where his victims' bodies were later discovered. Ridgway himself admitted to having a fixation with sex workers with whom he had a love-hate relationship with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he loved to have sex with them because he did that all in the military, but as his dad would talk about them and stuff like that, I wonder if that's kind of where that love-hate, he obviously hated women thanks to his mom, and his dad talked about sex workers, so I feel like his parents may have influenced that love-hate for them.
Right. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ridgway is believed to have murdered at least 71 teenage girls and women near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. In court statements, he later reported that he killed so many that he lost count. A majority of the victims occurred between 1982 and 1984. Do you believe the statement that he said he killed so many that he lost count, or do you think he was saying that to kind of like give himself more notoriety? Because we've mentioned several times that serial killers are known to do stuff like this.
Right. Yeah, I feel like there's no way he didn't know. I mean, for people, for these guys, they love to kill. They love the thrill of it. Something that Reichert had mentioned in my interview with him was that he had no motivation from the media. He didn't care that they gave him a nickname or that his name was being brought up in the media. That didn't motivate him. So I don't know if he was necessarily going for the notoriety in it at all. I do think that he had to have known how many he killed because he enjoyed it, obviously, and no remorse for it. And I don't know if it's in your notes later, so I don't know if I'm spoiling it some more, but, he did show them where more bodies were from the time he was arrested to his sentencing. So he knew where they were buried. So it just doesn't make sense that he wouldn't know the exact number.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't know all of that stuff, but I felt like he had to have known, and he was just saying that to make people more upset with him.
Right. Maybe. Who knows? You just don't understand him super well. Like, even the detectives and all these people, after they captured him and talked to him, still were like, oh, I don't know why he did it. He just says, because I could. So, you don't know. You don't know what his motivations are.
Yeah. So the victims were believed to be either sex workers or runaways whom he picked up along Pacific Highway South. Sometimes Ridgway showed the women a picture of his son to trick them into trusting him. That is disgusting.
Yeah. So there was actually a Lifetime movie. Don't know if you've seen it, where
No.
it was in the point of view of a victim. She was kind of like the narrator of it. And so it wasn't horrible, but I did learn a lot about him from that and like the sex workers. So it's still a Lifetime movie. So it wasn't the greatest, but.
Was it about him, but in the perspective of, oh, okay.
Yeah, so it talked about investigation things and, the women he picked up. I believe there was a woman who got away, so it went into that. So it did give you some background and stuff, and it was about basically capturing him. I think it was even called like Capturing the Devil or something like that.
Interesting. Well, if you as our listeners have seen that Lifetime movie, and you think it's great, definitely let us know. I have never seen it. I didn't even know there was a Lifetime movie.
Yeah, I feel like I've watched pretty much everything. Like I said, favorite serial killer sounds really bad, but
yeah.
I have done so much research on him that I've watched documentaries, I watched the Lifetime movie, read the book, all of it. It seems like I'm obsessed. I'm not.
I mean, personally, I know we're kind of like getting a little off topic here, but personally, serial killers are so fascinating where it's kind of hard to like, maybe it's hard to not have your own favorite serial killer because all of them are so unique in their own way.
Right. They're also, mommy issues is a big thing that connects them, but they're all different.
Yes. So, moving on, the victims would engage in sexual activity, and after minutes of intercourse from behind, Ridgway would wrap his forearm around the front of their necks and use the other arm to pull back as tightly as he could, strangling them. He killed most of his victims in his home, his truck, or in a secluded area. Most of the bodies were dumped in wooded areas around the Green River, Seattle, Tacoma International Airport, and other quote-unquote dump sites within South King County. There were 2 confirmed and other 2 suspected victims in Portland, Oregon. The bodies were often left in clusters, sometimes posed, usually nude. Sometimes he would return to the victims' bodies and have sex with them. Ridgway explained that he did not find necrophilia more sexually satisfying, but having sex with the deceased reduced his need to obtain a living victim and thus limiting his exposure to being caught. Did the interview that you have, was that mentioned at all?
I don't think so. Basically, because I was asking him more about the media's effects on killers. And so we did, we mostly talked about Ridgway because that's the serial killer he was in contact with. But for the most part, I was just getting his opinion on the media's influence. So I don't remember that.
Okay. So because most of the bodies were not discovered until only the skeletons remained, 3 victims remain unidentified, which is really sad. I feel horrible for their families.
Yeah, and like I said, this might spoil later, but I think the Lifetime movie is where I learned this. The detective went around to families of known victims and asked them if they could go for life in prison instead of the death penalty, because if they took the death penalty off of the table, he was going to show them where more victims were. And so those families could bury their daughters. So all of them agreed to that, and he showed them, like dozens more bodies. So they really didn't have a whole lot of bodies compared to like the 71 that he's confirmed to have killed when they first arrested him. which is pretty interesting to me. But it's really sad that people aren't nowadays. You know, we have all this technology and stuff. They're still not identified.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you, besides like dental records, can you identify victims with skeletal remains?
They should be able to, DNA and stuff. I don't know. I haven't been to the body farm for the bone class or anything yet, but there are so many different ways to be able to identify even skeletal remains. So I would feel like they'd have the ability, especially because, you're pretty much looking for people who are missing. So you have a smaller pool of people to look for. Or if their families never reported them missing because they were prostitutes. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Ridgway occasionally contaminated the dump sites with gum, cigarettes, and written materials belonging to others, and even transported a few victims' remains across state lines to Oregon to confuse police. Ridgway was arrested in 1982 and in 2001 on charges related to prostitution. He became a suspect in the Green River killings in 1983. In 1984, he passed a polygraph test. On April 7th, 1987, police took hair and saliva samples from Ridgway. The samples collected in 1987 were later subjected to a DNA analysis, providing the evidence for his arrest warrant. On November 30th, 2001, Ridgway was working at the Kenworth Truck Factory, where he worked as a spray painter when he was arrested. He was arrested on suspicion of murdering 4 women. On November 5th, 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder as part of a plea bargain. He agreed to in June that would spare him of death in exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of his victim and providing other details. In his confession, Ridgway said that he targeted prostitutes because they were, quote-unquote, easy to pick up and that he hated most of them. He confessed that he had sex with his victims' bodies after he murdered them, but he claimed to begin burying the later victims so that he could resist the urge to commit necrophilia. He later said that murdering young women was his career.
It's not a career.
No.
It's not a job. Yeah, that I had heard that part. He thought that ridding the world of prostitutes was like his job, that he was told to do it, basically.
I think I do remember reading something about that a long time ago. I don't remember when I read that or how I came upon that, but I do remember that there was a serial killer who was just like so fixated on prostitutes, but he wanted to get rid of them.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if it's true or not. In the Lifetime movie, they had a girl that got away from him, and she had scratched him so deep that it had left marks. And the police had actually come by his shop. I guess he was like a mechanic, and they went by his shop to talk to him, and he actually poured like battery acid over it to hide those claw marks. Huh. So he wouldn't be a suspect from her getting away. I don't know if that's fully true or not, because I don't know if I read that anywhere else or if I just saw it in the movie.
Interesting. So Gary Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison without parole, just like you mentioned, so they could help find all of the victims. Gary Ridgway was the second most prolific serial killer in the United States, according to confirmed murders. And for our listeners and for you as well, Haley, if you were paying attention to the geographical details, there is one serial killer that we mentioned before that also murdered in a similar area, but he's also, while in prison, he was also known to give detectives information on how to find serial killers. And I'm talking about Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Good old Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Ted Bundy assisted investigators to try to catch the Green River Killer by describing the psychology and characteristics of a serial killer. Which is very interesting.
He's like, I'm already, I'm in jail for life. Might as well help them catch others. It is interesting that he would just volunteer that information.
So it's like the Mindhunter series on Netflix. They're interviewing serial killers to try to get background information. And I know Mindhunter is a little different because that was taking you back to like the 1970s where they had known serial killers, but they didn't know really what to call them or classify them as. But they were trying to gather information to understand why they do these things, how they do these things.
Right.
And, it's crazy that someone as evil as Ted Bundy could come through to help find someone so evil. And again, just like BTK, if you look at Gary Ridgway's mugshot, he just looks evil.
Yes.
And down to the core, he looks evil.
I just fully believe he's pure evil based on, the no remorse and stuff like that. It just...
Yeah.
It's insane.
He just has, like, these evil eyes, and it, like...
he does. I don't know if I would, like, trust him to get in a car with him seeing his face. Like, knowing what we know about him, of course not. But,
yeah,
I don't know. Just like you said, just his face, you're like, you give me the creeps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's still alive. That's why we're talking about him in present tense, unlike some of the serial killers that we've talked about, and as well as Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. He's also still alive.
Just a fun fact about prior, because he's retired now, Congressman David Reichert. He actually, as a congressman, was, I don't know if he created, he started a bill to remove what they call murderabilia instead of memorabilia. It's like murderabilia. So, like those trading cards, those like baseball trading cards for serial killers and stuff like that. He was a part of a bill to like rid it, not being able to sell things and like glamorize being a serial killer. So even after catching a serial killer, retiring from police force, and then getting into Congress, he was trying to kind of fight for justice for people in that aspect.
Well, why would anyone want to have trading cards of serial killers? That's a weird thing to have. I mean, it's one thing to talk about them.
One thing to have like the museums, but to like have it in your own home is just really weird.
That seems incredibly suspect, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody who does this.
Yeah.
But
it's weird.
It seems suspect. Like try and picture it. Like you have murderabilia or like memorabilia of serial killers in your home.
Right.
And you're like glamorizing them and studying them.
Mm-hmm. So basically this bill, I think, made it so only museums could have it.
Which is fair.
Yeah. Why? Like, hi, welcome to my home. Look at my wall full of serial killer stuff. Like, I don't know. I would leave. Okay, bye. I don't want to be here. Like, you give me the creeps too.
Again, I am really sorry if I offend anybody who does that.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I love studying serial killers. I feel like, obviously, I called him my favorite serial killer, but I still wouldn't have, like, a trading card with his face and facts of him on it.
Or like one of those, like, Teen Beat centerfolds.
Definitely not.
If you don't know what Teen Beat is, or, like, 17 magazine, you're too young.
You're the generation after us.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. If people don't know what that is, it makes me feel old.
Yes. Or no, I think it was like called Tiger Beat. Either way.
Something. I know 17.
Yeah. It was like one of these magazines where you'd have like those gossip columns, and they have like a centerfold.
Tiger Beat.
Like Zac Efron or something.
And then J14 was also a magazine, I guess, back then too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like people don't get magazines the way they used to.
No.
Could you imagine a serial killer like magazine? Gosh.
And a centerfold of Ted Bundy.
He'd probably be on the cover every single time because everybody thought he was like so attractive. I don't get it.
Yes. I'm sure there are women out there who would love to have a centerfold of Ted Bundy.
Which is so weird. Sorry, people who find him attractive, but I don't know.
And, earlier in the week, I think on Facebook, someone reposted a link of like old photos of Ted Bundy, like family photos of Ted Bundy. And not once did he look attractive. He had like crazy eyes in all of the photos.
Crazy hair.
Yeah, he looked malnourished, and he like gave me the creeps just by looking at them because he like looked so uncomfortable in all of the photos.
Yeah, I mean, I just first off didn't find him attractive before. Well, I mean, I always knew who he was. I wasn't alive during that time, but I didn't find him attractive to begin with. And then you know who he is, and people still find him attractive. I'm like, you realize what he did, and killed all these people, right? Like, he's not a good person. I don't know.
Tell that to the woman who married Charles Manson while he was in prison.
And not the only one. I feel like didn't we talk about Eileen having maybe not getting married in prison, but they all get like love letters.
Yeah, Gypsy Rose Blanchard got engaged while she was in prison.
I knew somebody we talked about. Like they get love letters, they get married. I'm like, what in the world is going on with these people?
Yeah. All right. So moving on to our we just went down a weird rabbit hole.
I know. We just got stuck on that.
Moving on to our last serial killer, Glenn Rogers, also known as the cross-country killer. And he's interesting for one reason, and I'll explain that why. But I knew very little about this serial killer, but I'm glad that we're going to be talking about him because he's involved in a murder of someone that we talked about, like episode 2 or 3. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
But it, like I said earlier in the recording, everything just comes full circle.
And hopefully our listeners have listened to every single one and they'll know what we're talking about.
Yes. Kudos to you if you know who I'm talking about when I say episode 2. Thank you. All right. So on July 15th, 1962, Glenn Rogers was born and raised in Hamilton, Ohio. Rogers was expelled from his junior high school before he was 16. Sometime after his expulsion, Rogers' 14-year-old girlfriend got pregnant by another man. The young couple married and had another child in 1981. In 1983, Rogers' wife filed for divorce, alleging brutal physical abuse. Now, I didn't have a ton of background information on him, or really just information about his killings either. Just like little factoids. So if you guys know anything about the cross-country killer, I would love to know more about him.
Yeah.
Besides the interesting connection that he had. But what I do know is very little, unfortunately. So Glenn Rogers was featured on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list after a crime spree that began on September 28, 1995. Authorities suspected Rogers in the stabbing or strangling of an elderly man from Ohio in 1993, and 4 women in California, Mississippi, Florida. Good old Florida, always have to be a part of everything.
I know.
And Louisiana. He originally claimed that the number of murders was closer to 70, but recanted his statement claiming he was joking and had not committed any murders. Okay.
Sure. We believe you. JK, I never killed anybody. Just a funny joke.
How do you make that kind of joke and expect them to not take you seriously?
Who jokes about murdering people?
Yeah, especially 70 people.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, that's a lot of people. That's Gary Ridgway's number. So,
yeah.
No, it's a bad joke.
Yeah. The connection to the Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman murders. So this is interesting because O.J. Simpson claimed to have not killed anybody. So maybe it could have been Glenn Rogers. Who knows?
Maybe.
During a lengthy correspondence that began in 2009 between Rogers and a criminal profiler, Rogers wrote and created paintings about his involvement with these murders. During a prison meeting between the two, Rogers claimed that he was hired by O.J. Simpson to break into Nicole Brown Simpson's house and steal some expensive jewelry, and O.J. told him that, quote unquote, you may have to kill that bitch. Rogers' family stated that he had informed them that he had been working for Nicole in 1994 and that he had made verbal threats about her to them. Rogers later spoke to a criminal profiler about the Goldman-Simpson murders, providing details about the crime and remarking that he had been hired by O.J. to steal a pair of earrings and potentially murder Nicole. I don't know. I don't think he was the one who murdered Nicole and Ron.
Yeah. Did they make him try the glove on too? We'll never know.
No. Personally, I still think it was OJ.
I mean, either way, he would have a hand in it. He either did it or ordered somebody to do it. So either way, you're guilty. But
yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
You may have to kill that bitch. So
right.
Come on.
And then say this guy goes in and steals the earrings and doesn't kill her, and OJ's like, come on, you know? You're supposed to kill her, and so I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah, I still think it's OJ, but it's interesting that it could have been somebody else.
Especially a serial killer.
Yeah.
Like, how did you just happen to pick a serial killer and hire them to kill your wife? I don't know. That's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. On November 13th, 1995, Glenn Rogers was arrested and sentenced to death. Rogers was scheduled to be put to death on Valentine's Day, 1999 in Florida, but he immediately appealed to the Florida Supreme Court, claiming that the state had not presented enough evidence to support the charges. So it seems like he is still alive, which is an interesting connection to all three of these serial killers. They're still alive.
That is interesting, especially because we just picked them based on like their nicknames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of like answers my own question on how the death row system works, because there are some people that are on death row for like 10 years. There are some people on death row for like 20 plus years.
Right.
And it sounds like in order to prevent them from being executed, they just keep appealing until it sounds like they can't appeal anymore.
Which is kind of why it makes it more expensive than life in prison. You can appeal both, but they don't want to kill somebody before they're like absolutely sure they're like killing the right person, and the person has basically run out of appeals. So that adds to that cost of the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, you don't want to take people's right to appeal away, especially because we have seen people on death row get exonerated based on DNA evidence, so they should have never been on death row in the first place. So you really don't want to be executing people and they're innocent.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is all I have on Glenn Rogers.
Yeah.
All very interesting serial killers, and especially Gary Ridgway.
It's just interesting, I guess, because of having talked to the detective for me and kind of getting the insight into, like, they just don't even know why he did it. And that he was able to, like, fake people out and be this friendly neighborhood guy. It's creepy. With the Golden State Killer, he's been in your house and you have no idea he's in there. It's creepy.
Right. You always have to be careful with who you allow in your inner circle.
Exactly. Know your surroundings in your home. If you live in Texas like me, make sure you got some guns in your home. Keep yourself protected.
Yeah. And, there's just so many things going on in Texas, considering that you guys still have the highest amount.
We've gotten like 2 or 3 more. I think I got one this morning. Like, every time I see one, I'm like, Jesus Christ, what is going on? Even friends that that are not on this podcast and don't even really know that we've brought it up multiple times are like, man, Texas has a lot of Amber Alerts. And I'm like, hey, no joke. We have the most by a lot. There's been a lot this year. It's kind of scary to think about. And the only hope I have is that, the stats you gave in that episode is that the majority of these kids are found. So hopefully all these kids I've seen the past few days will get returned to their parents.
Yeah, I hope so. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Texas, get it under control.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all I have for today's episode. Haley, thank you so much for joining me. It was awesome to hear your little background information that you have on Gary Ridgway. I think that's awesome that you had that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, so cool. I wish he was still a congressman because I could have tried to get him on here. Because all you have to do is call their office and, request an interview. But I couldn't find any contact information for him now that he's retired. So that's a little sad.
It's okay. Let him enjoy his retirement. He sounds like he dealt with a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So before we go, why don't you let us know where our listeners can find you?
You can find me on Twitter at CSI Haley, and most of my tweets are about True Crime and Chill and Girls Pod. And of course, I retweet all of Puns Media, but follow me to just keep up with us.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Haley also hosts our show One for the Girls. So, and you guys talk about various topics, correct?
Yeah, just girl topics, I guess you consider them, but we try to make sure that, we talked about skincare and Gabby joined us last time and that was really exciting. I've bought some things that Gabby recommended. And we don't want to exclude men. Men should be washing their face too. So we try to do topics that can expand and also try to add in some serious stuff too. So there's fun and then there's some serious in there too.
So if you guys are interested in that, you can also look for her show. It's on Apple and Spotify, and we also post our recordings on YouTube as well. So if you are interested in looking for the skincare products that Haley shows on her most recent episode, look us up on YouTube. And as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at MoneybagsGabs. I tweet a lot about my True Crime and Chill show. I'm starting to tweet more about sports because sports are coming back, and I'm super pumped about it.
Same.
We have golf. We have golf back. I was watching golf all weekend.
I'm ready for hockey too. Let's go.
Yes. And if you guys have any recommendations on particular serial killers, crimes, anything related to true crime that you guys want to discuss, definitely let me know. And I have no problem researching it because there are so many ideas that I have in my head, and I have an awesome idea in the future that I think a lot of you guys will like. And I look forward to starting that little mini series.
Yes, me too.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.